myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot see.
Good afternoon. Welcome along to NUFC Matters. Eddie Howe press conference review for the Southampton Carabao Cup semi-final game at home tomorrow. 8 o'clock kickoff at St James's Park. First up was Razor from BBC Radio Newcastle asking about the new acquisition of Anthony Gordon. And Eddie Howe said that he would give a big boost to the squad. He has a lot of attributes. He's quick, he's dynamic, he's versatile. And the best is certainly yet to come with him being of such a young age. Asked about his character, he said he's fiercely determined, he's ambitious, and he knows the areas that he needs to improve in. He says, of course, it's always a risk bringing in a new player into the team environment. He said, but he's tracked him for a long time. He tracked him when he was out on loan. So clearly somebody he's been keeping an eye on over the course of his career. Asked about any further business in the window. Well, he said at the time of the press conference that Shelby was clearly talking to Forest. He wasn't sure where they were at with that deal. Emphasised that he's been a huge player for the club over the last 7 years. He has had injuries this season, of course, so I haven't seen a great deal of him. But he said he's got to accept the player's wishes. It's difficult to keep a player that doesn't want to stay. He emphasised that he rates him highly, and clearly said that if he does manage to sort this move to Nottingham Forest out and he leaves, that we will see what we can do in the market to replace him, but there's no guarantees that anybody will come in. Talked about the loan market as a possibility, but he just emphasised again something that he said throughout this transfer window and previous transfer windows, that they won't just take a player for the sake of it. It'll have to be the right kind of player, the right kind of price, and the right kind of character. Looking ahead to the game tomorrow night, Razor asked him, is it beneficial having that week to prepare? He said again, like he said last week, that you get a rhythm from playing games, so sometimes a layoff isn't beneficial, but sometimes it can be. He just basically said, look, there's no advantage for either team. I'm pleased with the way that we've trained. The first game was tight. He thinks essentially the first half Newcastle shaded it. The second half, the first 20 minutes or so, Southampton shaded it. But the game's not over. The tie's not over. It's in the balance. And as far as he's concerned, that is the message that he has drummed through to the players. Graham Courtney was next up, asking if younger players were the focus in this transfer window, with the acquisition of Gordon in his 20s, of course, early 20s, and potentially Dan Ashby coming in as well from West Ham, another kid. And he said, look, it depends on which position, you're looking at. He says, some positions have got experienced players at a certain age. And, we will be looking at bringing in players to learn and progress, hopefully, from those players that are in those positions. So certain positions in the team, yes, certainly looking for younger players, but not in all positions. Graham, bold question, said, is it time for Isak to start? He said, look, we've got decisions to make in a variety of positions. He says, as always, we're analysing the training, and I've got a few big calls to make. Isak, of course, pushing for a chance to start for Newcastle United. Do I think it'll happen? I think he'll go with an unchanged team, but we'll wait and see. Also, Graham Courtney talked about Bruno's back heel goal that he scored against Southampton. He says, is that the time that you knew that you had a player on your hands? He said, I just remember watching that goal and saying, how on earth did that go in? And then, wow, what a bit of skill. I didn't think I'd ever seen a goal like that. He said, yeah, that was when we knew he was a good player, but we realised he was going to be a huge player, and he has been a huge player for us. Graham Courtney then chucked in the 7-2 aggregate between the teams, Newcastle and Southampton, since Eddie Howe took over. And Eddie Howe was quick to play that down by saying, the 4-1 game was never a 4-1 game. We just happened to take our chances that day. He says, and if you take that game away, the rest of them have been very, very tight games. And re-emphasising again that the game and the tie, the semi-final tie, is evenly poised. Certainly doesn't want any complacency amongst the team, that's for certain. Keith Downey, next up from Sky, asking how big a decision was it for Gordon to come to Newcastle. He said, I can't answer that question. You've got to ask him that. I'm sure he'll have had time to think about it. Necessity, he said, but from our side, we saw the talent in the kid. We thought he would be a good fit, and we spent the money and acted accordingly and brought him in. Keith Downey said that the fan base were divided, which of course is true, over the signing of Gordon. Is he confident that will change? And he went, yeah, I am confident that'll change, because he's an incredible athlete. He goes box to box. There's passion there, which we saw when he played us. And, he's going to have to earn their support like every player does. He was also asked by Keith what his best position is. He said, look, he can play on either wing, but, I have seen him play number 9 and number 10 for Everton. So, it can give him satisfaction that he's gone out and replaced, the Chris Wood departure. And as he said last week, it was never going to be a like for like. He wasn't looking for a like for like. He was looking for somebody else who was going to give them something different. So he's very content with the options that he has up front. Keith also mentioned the fact that because of his age, that it gives him room to manoeuvre with a 25-man squad, and he just agreed. He said, "Yeah, that does help. The fact that he's in that age group where he doesn't take up a berth in the 25-man squad means there'll be a room for another name." Asked about John Joe Shelby by Keith. Again, he just said, "Look, it's a big decision for the player. He's going to have to think long and hard." Keith obviously mentioning the fact that there's a potential cup final as well. It must be tough for him to decide to go. And he just said, look, again, John Joe was huge for us last year. He played a huge part in keeping us in the division. And, I certainly haven't forgotten that. And, I'll be sorry to see him go if indeed he does go. Also asked about the support that the club had given him in the transfer market once again, and how pleased was he with that? And he said, I'm very pleased. The support internally at the club has been wonderful. Essentially I am hopefully looking to, the same player, a player in each window, a big player in each window to add to the squad. He's not keen on signing anyone short term, wants to sign players long term, and that's why they have to be the right fit, both on and off the pitch. Nisha was next up from BBC, asking if it would take a similar amount of time for Gordon to get in the team as it had for Bruno. He just said possibly. It depends on the opportunity that presents itself. He essentially reminded Nisha that, Gordon has come into a team that's done very well. But also saying that, I watch, I analyse during training, and, I will pick ultimately the strongest team on the day for Newcastle United. Also asked about preparing for the game whilst the transfer window is open, this semi-final, of course. And he just, did he find it difficult? And he went, look, I get used to it. He says, as you all know, I focus on the training and the players get all my attention. And then once that's done, I can switch off and then move on to, discussing things behind the scenes with players in and out. So, yeah, he knows what he's doing anyhow. Nisha, I think, just trying to push that and get a different answer. Atmosphere was the next thing from Nisha. Just saying how important is it, for this cup tie. And he just said, look, from his perspective, it's very important. He wants the fans to get behind them. He was also asked about, preparing for the game. Is it, essentially, any different to a league game? And he says it's exactly the same as a league game. He says there's an excitement about this one, though, of course. That's the only difference, because it's a semi-final, because, winning this game would see us, get into the final. So ultimately, no difference for Eddie. He just, he wants to get into this game and he wants to win this game. It's as simple as that, really. Also asked if, did he get sleepless nights? Did he get butterflies? And he went, touch wood, I've never had sleepless nights. He says, it's very important to get sleep, and I do get it. He says, of course, there's excitement. Of course, there's a bit of nervousness, and he says that all of that's linked. He said, but once you're out there and into the flow of it, he says, then you enjoy it and enjoy it more, of course, if you win. Asked if the draw at home in the semis, like in the second leg, was important as well. He went, yeah, of course. I mean, that's ultimately we did want that, and hopefully we can get the crowd into the game early on, because you never know how it's going to go. He just said, the crowd play a huge part. That 12th man, as it's often called, plays a huge part in this. Katie was up next. She just basically said, look, it's a big game. You're one win away from Wembley. How does that make you feel? And he just said, look, we feel the passion of the supporters. We see supporters, day in, day out, even coming in and out of the training ground. Supporters are there. He says the messages from the fans have been very emotional and expressive. He says, but we just need to concentrate on the job in hand. We need to blank out all the noise. We need to keep our emotions in check. And, we need to go about the job professionally and get the job done. So, yeah, you just said it is a big game. We realise that, but we are focused and ready to do the business. David was next up, asking, is he surprised how easily, the cup run has started? They've targeted cup runs. Have they targeted cup runs, as far as, this season's concerned? You went, look, you always hope and you dream about having a cup run. And we're lucky in the sense that we've had one this year. He says, got to remember, we haven't achieved anything yet. We've got to stay in the moment. We've not got to get ahead of ourselves, and we've got to make sure that, again, we focus and concentrate on the job. And next up was a question from David about Gordon, just basically saying, how is he coping mentally with the relationship that he's had with the Everton fans in recent weeks. And he went, look, he has coped. He's coped with it well. We are going to give him support. But he just said, look, from my perspective, walking him around the club yesterday, very impressed with him. He had to meet new players. He had to take a lot of information in. He had to meet his new teammates and just take in his new surroundings. He said, but he didn't seem daunted by it. And he really, really did impress him. Lee Ryder then said, how important is it to keep competition within the squad? And again, just reiterated the fact that he'd love to sign, one player a window, and bringing a new face in, it changes the dimension of the group, and it keeps people on their toes and keeps the momentum building. So very important to keep competition for places, and ideally that's something he wants to continue. Lee also said that, it must be great to have a player like Anthony Gordon who can be one for the here and now, but one for the future. And Eddie just said, yeah, I mean, it is good because, hopefully he will be here long term. He's a good, he is, but he is one for the here and now, I'm sure he'll hit the ground running. He's got Premier League experience, of course, and somebody who can fit straight in. It's just getting him into the squad. Lee said as well, it would probably be useful for him to, with him being cup tied, to be able to sit in the stand and absorb the atmosphere tomorrow. And he agreed as well. He says sitting in the stands and watching is completely different to sitting in the dugout or to playing a match. And I'm sure he'll learn a lot from that. And again, just common sense from Eddie there. He asked Lee as well about ASM, any movement. Been a few rumours about him going to AC Milan. And it was a very short, concise answer from Eddie. He went, there's nothing in that. He's here to stay. He's an integral part of the squad. Ian Murtagh next said, 2 outcomes tomorrow. Newcastle win or Newcastle lose. Newcastle go to Wembley. Newcastle get knocked out. Does it make or break your season? Eddie said, I don't think it does make or break the season. He says, we know how important it is and we would love to progress. He's also asked if he was concerned about Callum Wilson's lack of goals. He went, not at all. I've spoken about this in previous press conferences. This week is the first full week of training he's had since the World Cup. He said, I've always backed Callum Wilson to score goals. Then Ian cheekily asked, does he start tomorrow? And he went, that's for me to know and you to find out. Luke Edwards had a few questions today. He says, 1-0 up in the first leg. What's the message tomorrow night? He went, we look at it as an independent game. He says, obviously, we want to express ourselves in a positive manner, but we look at this like a league game. We want to win it. Again, Luke, just saying, how great the atmosphere had been against Leicester in the quarterfinal. and would he be happy if it was a similar kind of atmosphere? And he went, the more flags and scarves, the better. He went, yes, please. He says, it's a beautiful sight. There's nothing better than coming and, stand on that sideline and absorbing that before a big game. Also asked about the window. He said, is it fair to say that after Anthony Gordon, you would have probably been happy with that and just cracked on until the John Joe situation? And he went, yeah. He says, I would have been, I wasn't looking or pushing for any other players in. He says, but with John Joe going, he says, obviously it's late and it's not ideal. So obviously we're going to be looking, because it leaves us a little bit short in that area, but there's no guarantees we'll get anybody in, because they've got to be the right fit on and off the pitch. Miles Starford from the Shields Gazette was next, asked if there was any injuries to the team. He went a couple of knocks, but nothing major. He then paid tribute to Kieran Trippier signing a new contract. He said he was delighted for him. Magnificent player since he walked into the club. He's a huge presence on and off the pitch, and his leadership is something which has been massively helpful to him. Kieran was next up, again asking about Gordon and Trippier. Have they managed to meet up yet? And has that all been sorted out after their little tete-a-tete earlier on the season? He says it was very interesting to watch that clip back. He said you don't think much about it when the player on the other side is an opponent. He says I think the one thing that his new teammates will see is that that he's got passion and he's got spirit. And he said what I loved about it was he didn't back down in that situation. He's going to take time to blend in with our team, but I think the players love what they saw, and they're happy to have him as a teammate now, as opposed to an opponent. Kieran also asked him, was it quite an emotional situation between him and John Joe? And he went, yeah. He says, I'm an emotional guy off the pitch and away from the cameras, and he's a passionate guy. He said, I'd love him to stay, but we've got a mutual respect, and I understand from his position that this is an opportunity that he's got to take as a professional footballer. So the genuine sadness, I think you can pick up from this press conference, that Eddie is genuinely sad that he's got to let Shelby go. Next up was a guy called Mark. Not heard his voice before, but he just basically mentioned the talk and at the moment about downgrading the League Cup, potentially even making it a competition for the 21s or the 23s. And he just said, look, how important is the cup? He says, and he said, Eddie Howe said, I'd be completely against downgrading this competition. I think it's a wonderful cup. He says, I love the fact there's a two-legged semi-final, and I would be completely against any changes to it. He's also asked about Darlow, and any further forward on that. And he said, well, yeah, there's been conversations between Newcastle and Hull, but he will be staying at the club at this moment in time until the semi-finals being played, and then we'll be looking at that situation again. Obviously, because of this complicated situation we have with goalkeepers, where Dubravka's cup tied after playing for Manchester United in the Carabao Cup, so he can't play in this. For us, Karius, of course, we've got him till the end of the season, so he would be available. But looks like Darlow will be on the bench tomorrow for Nick Pope, and then they'll probably allow him to go out on loan after that. Then there was Scott from the Northern Echo asking if Ashby was still possible, after he'd said a little bit earlier in the press conference that maybe the business was done. He went, yeah, that's not off the table yet. He says it's to be concluded, so potentially that could still go ahead. Now, next up was Louise Taylor, whose mobile went off actually and caused a bit of a stir. She then said, you've changed a lot. Your managerial style has changed a lot. You're now a master of dark arts and time wasting. Are you the new Diego Simeone? He just laughed, as did a lot of the guys, a lot of the press guys, and just basically said, look, things are being blown completely out of proportion. He says, I did go to watch Simeone. He said, I used to go and watch 1 hour training sessions that he did. He says, but I didn't take any dark arts away from those training sessions. And he said, I've not really changed as a manager. He says, I'm the same manager. I've got the same principles. I'm managing a huge club now. He says, but things are different. So she said, is the template still Kevin Keegan with modifications? And he said, yeah, look, he says, it is a little bit, I guess. He says, we want to entertain the fans. We want to attack. We want to be front foot, and we want to win. Mark Carruthers, good to see Mark in there. Does a lot of the non-league stuff, but also works up at the Chronicle. asking if he had to overcome a mental barrier with his semi-final, and he went, "No, it's just another game, and it's fundamental. We put the effort in, and we like to win games." Jacob was last. Never heard of Jacob either. Asked if he'd spoken to Joe Linton, now that the legalities had all been sorted out. And he went, "Yeah, we've had several discussions. They've been in-depth on a personal level, and I am happy with where he is at mentally." So that was Eddie's press conference today. All good, as always. Big shout out to everybody in the chat. Les, Rob, I'm going to give you a ring very shortly. Mr. Anderson, how are you? Trolls, hope you're well. Darren Lee says he's sad to see Shelby go. Trolls says, so happy. Howe said ASM is integral to the team. Buzzing, to be honest. And who else is in the chat this afternoon before I come back on later on? You can see ASM going in the summer. Yeah, possibly. Sounds like Milan want ASM one of the top targets. I don't think for them. Can anyone answer, for God's sake? Is this live? Political bias. Have you asked a question? Is this live? Yes, mate, it's live. Sorry. When I'm reading out my notes, I can't answer live, mate. Sorry. Yeah, Les has just answered the question there. Steve tends to go through the presser, but I think he doesn't look at the comments. I might be wrong though. You are correct. ASM just has no end product of late apart from speed at times. It's like he forgets it's a team game. He has tried his best though, and he has changed. Sander Berge will be sold. Newcastle have offered more money than Fulham. A loan to Newcastle will be more money for Sheffield United, and Newcastle could loan him back till the end of the season. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that one. Paul Gallant, I hope you're well, mate, as well. I'm going to be nipping off now because I'll be back with the fans forum later on. I was watching Tune In the podcast this morning. They were talking about Rufus Loftus-Cheek on loan, but I understand he wants to stay. Les says, I've only seen carries for the friendly, but thought he was impressive. Don't quite understand that either. Good. Cheers, Steve. Okay, listen, Simon, these questions are always so weak. You are right, mate. Yeah, some really weak questions at times. But I guess when it's positive, they don't want to push them too much. Anyway, that's me for now. I'll be back at 6 o'clock with a fans forum. Tune in then. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Take care. A big thank you to all our sponsors, as always. Thanks to Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, and our website skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Garden of Healing Dispensaries, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists. You can find them at thegohd.com. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria, and you can find them at mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to make an order, give them a call on 01768 210 102 or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to Blowhole Breweries, you can get a selection of beers, and the cans are in the design of the old Newcastle United entertainers strips. Blowholebrewery.co.uk. Thanks to Melly's Carpets and Beds, laying our reputation one recommendation at a time. The best quality around at the cheapest prices. Melly's Beds and Carpets.co.uk. Email sales@mellysbedsandcarpets.co.uk or give Melly a call on 01670 632 216. And thanks to United Group Travel Limited, UK coach holidays in Morpeth, 01670 362 460 or mobile 07957 141 654. Graham, your driver, Beverly answering your calls and looking after you on your tour. Some great deals coming up there. Get yourself onto the website to check them out. Thanks also to Media Arts, who do all of our videos and help us with the technological side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the channel, then hit the subscribe button below. Hit the thumb up, which is the like button, which does us a big favour with the algorithm. And click share. Share it to Newcastle United, Facebook groups or Twitter accounts or your own social media to help our community grow. And if you want to join the channel, hit the join button. And for as little as $1.99 a month, you can get some members-only videos and chances to win some fantastic prizes. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. Don't forget as well that we do events through NUFC Matters, and this one is the next event coming up, Friday the 24th of February, an evening with Newcastle United legend Steve Howe. Friday the 24th of February, Tyneside Irish Centre, and tickets are available at £50 from newcastlelegends.com. If you also go onto Voucher and search for the event, you can pick up a bargain on there. Don't forget, we also support the food bank on this channel. www.nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is where you can find the Matchday Bucket. You can make a virtual donation to the Matchday Bucket 365 days of the year to keep helping the food bank in Newcastle.